The Bowlsby Pod, Big 12, what have they done lately? And what are they doing right this absolute week and this minute? And we start the Bowlsby Pod with UCF. Oh, my goodness. What was such a bright, unbelievable, attended big noon kickoff. Largest crowd, they said, ever. Unbelievable energy, as you can imagine, at the Bounce House and in Orlando. And they then thud.
Yeah. And this is one I was so dead wrong about because I just thought, even though Colorado's playing better, the thing that UCF does really well is the thing that Colorado's bad at, which is stopping the run.
Or had been bad at. And then they were able, I think one of the things they were able to do is they were able to build a lead so that late in the game, and the reason the UCF runs game is so good lately, outside of the TCU game, is they've gotten ahead of people and they just run the ball. And this was, only their second real or third real test of the season. And, Colorado came out and got a lead and kind of made that whole offense moot and took them out of their game plan. And that's really the first time I've seen Colorado do that in 2 years, where they were so effective on both sides of the ball that UCF kind of had abandoned who they are for a little while. And that to me is growth. That means that you can contend. If you can take a team out of their game plan early in the game, that's good stuff there. So, but UCF surprised. I think they'll bounce back for the most part. These things are going to happen, but really surprised that they did not control the flow of that game given what we thought it was. But look, Colorado's growing up.
Yeah, Colorado played really well. Give them a lot of credit. They didn't come out in the next game and have a hangover like their opponent the previous week did. They came out and very well could have been emotional and overhyped and looking past UCF because they had been celebrating, and instead they looked like a well-oiled machine, and I think that bodes really well for Dion and company, that they're playing well, but they also seem to have a good focus, and this would have been a time to perhaps have a lapse, and instead they roll into Orlando and handle their business and made it look very easy. That was an incredible crowd at UCF, great audience on TV, 4 million plus people for that game alone. So the Colorado attraction continues on as far as TV ratings go. And with that big stage in front of them, UCF just messed the bed. They did. KJ Jefferson and that offense, I was shocked by how difficult it was for them to run the football and to be effective. I really thought that Colorado would have a hard time stopping them, and was even pumping up of like, man, get ready to watch, this whole contingent of running backs and your running quarterback just smash on that Colorado defense. And instead they smashed it's the other way around. Like that Colorado defense smashed the UCF offense that has been so prolific. Shedeur did his thing. Travis Hunter did his thing. He's got a touchdown. He's got an interception. He's still very much in the Heisman conversation, deservedly so. But, yeah, I think the turnovers were killer here for UCF. You had the big scoop and score at the end of the game to just add insult to injury. But KJ Jefferson with a couple of interceptions, turned the ball over when you got an opportunity to score. Just seemed like most, though, of all was that we hadn't really seen UCF get tested all that much, and they went up against probably the best passing test not named Arizona in the conference, and maybe you throw somebody else in there, but I think we're pretty safe with Arizona and Colorado saying they've got great passing games. Colorado's more depth to theirs because they have more weapons. It's not just Teteroa McMillan and Noah Fafita going back and forth. This is Shedeur having a bunch of good targets, and I think that the shocking thing is just like, wow, imagine when they got a running game going along with that. But they tested that secondary, and they broke that secondary, and now we know a bit more about UCF and what they've got on the back end, and it wasn't good enough against Colorado.
And now they play a game that has been like waiting for a special dinner, especially with Florida a little bit. Well, they're gimpy. But this could have been a game coming off another win. And now I would think that Gus Malzahn and his football team kind of went back to like, no outside noise. We focus on us, which is what you're supposed to do anyway. And now they get the showdown with the team in their state that they are jealous of, and yet another team that's always had the tradition that is struggling in Florida.
Yeah, I don't know how UCF fans will take being – you saying jealous of, but I'm sure they are. Like, I mean, I know, but, as fans, you don't want to say, like, we're jealous of Florida. But, yeah, I mean, from the standpoint of, like, sure, Texas Tech and Baylor would love to have Texas' success.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think they aspire to
right.
that.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's the more dignified way to say it. I do know this though.
I'm not dignified.
That the Florida faithful look down on UCF and always will. UCF could have 7, like in the next 100 years, could have 7 presidents elected that came from their school, doctors that cure cancer, Nobel laureates, and all that, and Florida would still be like, oh, it's a commuter school in Orlando. Like that's how they look at it because they're the old guard of the state. So
they're an original member of Augusta National.
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to look down on anybody that's not them, and especially a school that's new by their standards like UCF. Well, UCF's, probably a more complete team than Florida is right now. Now, I don't know what's going to happen when they roll into the swamp. It's always a hard place to play. Until a month ago, it was always a hard place to play. It's not so much right now, but if they can go in and win that game, Billy Napier's probably on his way out the door Sunday morning, if not Saturday night. And UCF has, another badge on the wall because they beat him in the bowl game a couple years ago.
Yeah, and if not, then they're really licking their wounds with back-to-back losses, and all of a sudden the tone has changed down in Orlando after a really nice start. So, yeah, this is an important game to just see how they bounce back from getting embarrassed. And make no bones about it, they got embarrassed by Colorado on Saturday. It happens to everybody. It's happened to Colorado, and it will probably happen again to all parties sooner rather than later. But, yeah, I don't know what to make of Florida in this game. I really don't. This is a very closely spread. There's a close spread on this game, and I think you go to like ESPN's predictor machine, it's like 51-49. So I think every metric is pointing at this being a close game, and not anybody really having a good idea of what to expect. Like, had UCF gone in and rolled Colorado, you'd be like, yeah, UCF's going to go in the swamp and they're going to win. But after last week, it's like, was DJ Lagway going to throw for like 300 yards on that secondary? Are they going to shut down the running attack like Colorado was able to do? Because I'd imagine Florida's got some better players up front. But yeah, this is it's kind of a toss-up game, which is crazy to think. UCF did get the last laugh in that Gasparilla Bowl, which led to one of the funnier memes that I saw in the last couple of years, and I don't know who the girl is. I've seen her on Twitter before, but it was back when we were still doing everything over Zoom. And I guess she's from Florida. She's a UCF girl and was on a Zoom call with like a Florida coworker, and she had on like her UCF polo and then had like the game score in the background as her backdrop. So it was just hilarious that she was talking trash on this work call. And that's what I remember from that Gasparilla Bowl was that celebration. But they've only played 3 times. Florida won the first couple in 99 and 06. And then that Gasparilla Bowl just 2 years ago, UCF got that first win over the Gators. So see if they can't tie this all-time series up. But easier said than done.
All right. Cincinnati went to Tech, lost in Lubbock. Very entertaining game, back and forth. A pick six at the end of the game kind of pretty much sealed it up for Tech, and Cincinnati was still trying to drive to maybe kick a game-tying field goal. They're playing well. The offense puts up a lot of points and yards. They're off this week, as is BYU, who's a part of the Bowlesby pod, as they're off after the win against Baylor. But Cincinnati, BYU off. Houston, and we will touch on the teams I mentioned, but Houston is at TCU. That's a Friday night game in the Big 12. And Houston's a part of the Bowlesby pod too.
Yeah, so I think Cincinnati did a lot of things that you liked in that game against Texas Tech, just hanging in there given the injuries that they had, losing the top 2 running backs, and especially when you know what those guys starting with Corey Kiners, you know what part of the muscle that they are for that UCF offense to basically just say, like, all right, Brendan Sorsby, you got to throw us to victory here and then run a little bit when you can. That was asking a lot, and he damn near did it. I think he's a really good quarterback who's just really getting started, and he's only going to get better and better, but he's definitely an improvement upon what we saw from them last year. I think they're a good team. I think they had a bunch of ways to win that game, and I'm not so sure if they don't have a couple guys get hurt that they don't win that game if they're able to run the ball more effectively. Luckily for Tech, that wasn't the case. That's part of Tech knocking guys out of the game too. Like that's part of the back and forth, but I haven't seen an update on Corey Kiner, so I don't know what the status is there on him or Pryor, but without knowing that, it's hard to to know kind of what to expect from them moving forward. But I like what I've seen. They're definitely improved from last year. Sorsby's definitely the guy at QB. If their running backs are healthy, they're going to be hell for a lot of teams. They were bull rushing Texas Tech's O-line. Like, they were all up in the backfield, and they were getting a lot of pressure, but it just ultimately wasn't enough. But I think they're in a good spot. Obviously, you want to be better than you are. You're thinking of the playoff a couple of years ago, and I know that's been kind of a downward spiral for them, but I think you've got to be excited about what you've seen, and you definitely know you should have a couple more wins than you even have. If you look back at, the Pitt game, and then Texas Tech, you had a real shot on a Saturday night in Lubbock in a shootout. You damn near won it without a couple of your better players, so I think that's very encouraging, and I like the energy right now around Scott Satterfield's crew, and I didn't always feel that way, but I do feel that way after watching them a handful of times now.
All right, BYU is off. We've discussed them quite a bit yesterday. We'll go back to them in a second, but let's go to Houston. We know that they obviously are desperate to get a win. The first year under Willie Fritz, there's so much furniture to replace and new furniture and renovations and whatever. At TCU, coming off, it's not about TCU, it's about Houston, but TCU coming off the win against KU. Houston just playing it out, and just every game you hope that players who are inexperienced and young or whoever recruits from Willie Fritz have a chance to get snaps.
Yeah, Houston's just Royden described this. Royden Ogletree was just on me in the triple option. You know, they're like rebuilding the car from scratch, and they don't have wheels yet. Like, they've got parts, but they don't have that yet. This is what happens in year one of a coach. And so they've got to find out. They've just got to figure out what they have, who they are, what you can do. And those things are going to come throughout the year. Unfortunately for them, they're in a conference that's pretty closely matched, the other 15 teams ahead of them. And it's not going to be – they're not going to get a get-right week, because they're the get-right week. That's what sucks for them, is that they're the get-right week right now. But long-term, I think things are good for Houston, but short-term, it's just going to be rough.
There's no doubt, Craig, I know you got to go. You're up next. There's no doubt that Houston and Baylor, as of now, will be on nothing but ESPN+. And there's always a handful of games each weekend, but that is destined for an ESPN Plus game.
I mean, those two playing each other, yeah, for sure. I think they'll probably each have, another opportunity to be on national TV, but playing each other, yeah, I don't see how there's an audience really for that at all. Even when they're average, it's two smaller schools, right, that have their little pockets. But regardless, I think that Houston's got a really good defense. Maybe really good's putting too much on it, but I think they've got an above-average good defense that's got a lot of promise. And I think you saw some of that in that Iowa State game. It was 3-0 at halftime, guys.
Oh, I know.
It was 3-0 at halftime. Iowa State wins 20-0. But Houston's defense played well enough for them to win that game. Unfortunately, they don't have an offense to save their life. And Donovan Smith's just not that guy at quarterback. Did y'all see the final stat lines from this game, by the way?
I did.
71 yards passing for Donovan Smith on 8 of 12 attempts. 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Zion Chris, the transfer, he got a little bit of playing time. He threw 4 passes. 1 was a completion. He actually threw 2 completions technically because 1 was to his team, the other was to the other team. But he was 1 for 4 with 1 yard passing and 1 interception. So that quarterback play is not going to win any games. I don't care who you are. So start there. That offense needs a lot of work, but that defense is at least making them, make other teams work for it a little bit like they did with Iowa State last week. But, yeah, this is the start of a building project. They're building the foundation right now. That defense is a good place to start, but they just don't have what they need to be competitive this year.
Yeah, and that quarterback they have the commitment from is not until for another couple of years as they try to figure out what they're going to do there. Donovan Smith got a lot of last-minute push before the season about what he might be at the next level. They need to figure out what he can be at this level. He had problems with turnovers when he was at Tech. There's no question that has been an issue with him.
They only threw it 16 times, but 72 yards passing.
Yeah, they ran for like 170.
They ran for 170, but and I know some of that's Iowa State's defense as well that everybody's mimicked in the Big 12, but still 72 passing yards, unless you're like freaking Army or something, like you got to throw for more than 72 yards.
Army threw like 7 last weekend. They got pass happy.